Okay, good evening. This is Ellen Teeter. I'm the Executive Director of the Florida State Oriental Medical Association. I'm very happy to have Chase Howard with us to talk about the, oh dear, I forgot the title of the thing, the patient no-show and cancellation policy, which is something I'm interested in. So we've got Chase Howard is just moved to Tampa with the Florida healthcare law firm. They have an office down in South Florida. Now they're going to have an office in Tampa, but they're available all over the state. You can contact them. One of the FSOMA member benefits is to be able to get a free consultation and some pennies off your law fees if you need to hire them. Chase works with all sorts of physicians, dentists, physician's assistants, acupuncturists, all sorts of different medical practices. He's great with helping with contract reviews and HR issues, estate planning, all of the stuff that we kind of need to keep in our minds as business people, operational compliance, and more. So I want to welcome Chase, and it's going to be an audio webinar tonight, but here we go.
Thank you very much, Ellen. As always, it is such a pleasure to be here and speaking with FSOMA and the members, whether it's live or the recording. Just a couple of, I guess, notes before we start going. I will have some notes that will follow up, or I guess maybe when you see the recording, you will get those. So I'm going to have some notes, kind of some key points that I talk about tonight. And then if there's any questions on the topic from any attendees, we will certainly incorporate those into the notes so everybody can, see what was asked, whether they, were live or otherwise. If you have a question, you can either use the Q&A box. I see one popped up now, and I'll answer that in a moment, or put it in the chat. Feel free to ask questions throughout. I know you'll be typing and I'll be answering verbally, but certainly like to have some interaction throughout. This won't be a super long presentation, just simply because the topic is such that we're focused on 2 points here. But absolutely, any questions you have, bring them up. What I'm going to do tonight is talk a little bit about, mostly about patient no-show cancellation policy. And a little bit about how to identify issues, work with issues, and contract around those issues. So we'll get into that in a moment. Let me just answer the first question that popped up. Do I work with people who have liens on a house from a contractor? I don't do that. However, we can certainly put you in touch with some people that do that. We've got a really broad network of attorneys and various advisors that are in the healthcare business. So look to us certainly as a resource anytime you'd like to. We can put you in touch with all types of people, lending, real estate. We help with licensure. We help with disputes between provider and patient. And we do a lot of business and corporate law in addition to advising on regulatory issues, meaning the laws that affect you as doctors. So with that, again, any questions from attendees, you can put it in the Q&A, or you can put it in the chat, and then I'll put my email information in there as well. So patient no-show and cancellation policies. As a doctor, and as if you're a business owner as well, dealing with patients and employees are your 2 biggest sources of liability. One of them, there's major compliance with employees, right? You want to make sure that you're treating them appropriately, and you want to avoid any sort of employment law claims. That's an internal threat that if you run afoul of state law, and if you fall under any federal laws, we absolutely want you to be aware of what you can and can't do, what you can and can't say, and strategize before you make a decision. So we're not talking about employees tonight, but that's one source of kind of issues in a practice. The second major source is your patients. And we're going to not talk about malpractice tonight, but kind of the other ways that you could run into potential issues with patients. And we'll look at them more so from the call it customer standpoint than patient, because we're going to deal a little bit with healthcare laws, but mostly this is contractually. What are your policies? And patient policies certainly go deeper than just no-show and cancellation. And it all starts with kind of your initial intake with the patient and what they're being told, what forms they're being given, when they're signing those forms, how you maintain those forms, and how you update a patient based on any changes to that. So it's certainly my advice to always have a robust set of patient intake forms. That includes, some sort of health history, reasons for why, they're presenting to you at that moment. Is it injury? Is it pain? Is it otherwise? What type of background they have, meaning, have they been to an acupuncturist before? Have they seen other types of providers for different things? You obviously want to gather all that information, learn about them, because when you put in place a treatment plan, or if you need to work hand in hand with another licensee, it's important to have that information. In addition to that, patient consent form, right? Consent for treatment, informed consent for treatment, making sure that you're disclosing to a patient in writing, and then going over with them as well what the proposed treatment plan is and looks like. What the benefits could be, what the benefits are, what the potential risks are, right? If there's any, negative adverse effects that are acceptable or likely could happen, or if there's compounding factors that could lead to those or make something worse. You want to make sure you go through that with them. What you don't necessarily have to go through with them line by line on would be what I just will refer to as patient policies. This includes no-show and cancellation. So let's talk about patient policies in general. In general, if you do not put something in writing to a patient, or we can call them a customer, then it didn't happen. What's that mean? Basically, if you verbally just tell a patient that they got to give you 24 hours notice for cancellation, or you're going to charge them a late fee, and then you go ahead and charge them a late fee because they were late or canceled or whatever it may be, they could dispute that, and they would very likely win a dispute, right? If there was any monetary, charge within there. So importance of having something in writing is, not only just to disclose it and disclaim it to the patient, but also to protect yourself if you do commit an action that a patient maybe later disputes. Very similar, to if you're not writing something in a patient, health record, then it didn't happen, right? If there's no record of it, you can't prove that it happened. So no-show and cancellation policies, when to have them, when to use them, when to have them signed, what's some good thoughts to put in your policies. Really important to have a patient no-show and cancellation policy signed at the initial visit, before you start seeing the patient, and have it be maybe its own page of this intake form. And I think that's a good practice for any varied style of, or any variation of what policy you're going to have. So have no show and cancellation be its own page. It only needs to be maybe one page. It doesn't need to be 10 different pages. But no show and cancellation go on the same one, and it should cover and discuss and lay out just exactly that. What happens if a patient has an appointment, um, doesn't show up and give any sort of notice, cancels, very close to the time of the appointment, or, otherwise just doesn't communicate, is late, and then expects to be seen. Without any sort of policy in place, it's hard for you to, maintain a practice, right? Where you might have people not showing up, being late. That takes, slots away from other patients that might be wanting to come in at that specific time, especially if it's a prime time, right? If it's a lunch break, or if it's before office hours or after work, right? If someone wants to come in around their work schedule, you want to protect your practice, from having, open slots at prime time, right? So how do we do that, right? Having a policy that very clearly lays out, once you've made an appointment, this appointment's been reserved for you specifically. We ask that you maybe put down a credit card, or at least put down, call it a down payment or otherwise, right? A bit of a copay, right? Up front. And we do that because we want you to be committed to either A, giving us plenty of notice so that we could rebook the spot, and B, we just, we want to be treated with respect. Having a, nominal number in there, I think to start is always good. It just shows that, hey, if you're not going to give us the courtesy, if you're not going to show up, if you're just going to be late, and it's going to throw off our schedule or leave our schedule open, we're compensated slightly for it. You're slightly penalized for it. We won't use that termination. We won't use those terms, excuse me. But it just gives the patient gives them a responsibility to you as well. Your responsibility to them is be there for the appointment, see them, relatively on time, and not be too late one way or the other. Run your practice in an efficient manner so that, if they're coming in on their lunch break, or if they took a sick hour from work, you want to see them, do what you need to do, get them in and out. So, it's worthwhile to them. And you're really just asking for the same thing in return. So we want this in writing because, again, you can get kind of complex with what you're asking of them. That could mean, like I said, having a nominal fee on there for booking the appointment, keeping the appointment. And if they don't give you notice or cancel or otherwise, or they're late, like I said, there's a little bit of a, monetary value to it so that you're still compensated for it. It forces them to, be alert to it. The next part to these no-show and cancellation policies would be making sure that if there are exceptions to it, you very clearly lay those out. For example, if somebody, gets into a car accident right on the way there and they can't call you, you might maybe charge them the fee or not give them the fee, but they might call you back and say, hey, I'm so sorry, in an accident, whatever, here's the report to it. That's why I couldn't get to you, right? And then that gives you the opportunity to kind of evaluate on a case-by-case basis if it makes sense to not charge them for that, maybe, rebook them, et cetera. Why is it important to have terms like that laid out? Well, we also want to avoid discrimination, right? We want to make sure that if you are charging somebody for a no-show or cancellation, and say there's a fee included in there, we want to make sure that you're doing it in a consistent manner. You're not, whether you're doing it on purpose or otherwise, it doesn't look like you're, charging one person versus another. And maybe those people know each other and they talk and, they say, oh, I was, late and I never got charged. And the other person was charged, right? Then you've got kind of, pushback on, are you applying it equally? And that's equally important. We put the policy in place and keep it, try to keep it as simple and straightforward as possible, because it gives you something to look back on and say, I know exactly what my policy is. I know how I'm going to apply it to everybody, and I'm going to apply it that way. And that way there's no, oh, what did I do last time? Let me do this time. You can certainly get flexible with things, but generally you want to, create a policy that's flexible for you and then follow the policy. That way you avoid any claims of, you're discriminating against one patient versus another for whatever the reason may be. But it also just really keeps things simple and easy for maybe it's your staff and also for your patients. They know what to expect. They know what's going to happen. They know that they got to call you 24 hours or 48 hours in advance. And if they're more than X number of minutes late, expect that their appointment's going to get passed over. They might get charged for it. All of those things are important to go into a no-show and cancellation policy so that you can protect your business, you can protect your practice and how it runs and flows, and give the courtesy to the other patients who are showing up on time to actually, receive the benefit that they expect to receive and not have them be impacted by, any other patients. Again, I see we had a few other attendees jump in. If there's any questions, certainly feel free to throw them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll be happy to kind of answer throughout. To tag on to the no-show and cancellation policy. So I'm talking about maybe having a fee associated with this. And that's up to you, of course. Not everybody does that. They just simply might ask for the courtesy. But if that gets abused and, you find over and over patients, aren't really respecting that, then that's where a fee might come in. But how do you ensure that you actually get the fee? Well, that might be where you are keeping a payment on file, like a credit card, for example. Or if you have, a concierge style practice, maybe you're keeping, money in like a retainer of sorts that can be used for services. Or maybe you have a membership where monthly you've got, patients paying X amount for certain services and certain access. Well, in those cases, or just simply in the case of you require a credit card at booking, either A, your forms need to alert the patient that you do require a method of payment at booking, so you can book and reserve the appointment, or separate of that is you require to keep a credit card on file, and this could be to pay for a cancellation or no-show fee. It could also be to cover your services in general. We'll talk about that in a moment, but what else do you need? Well, if you're going to keep a card on file, you want to make sure you have a authorization from the patient that they've read and signed that says, I understand that my credit card can be charged for any administrative fees, including no-show fees, cancellation fees, late fees, etc. And that would go into also like, it would say, I authorize you to charge my card for services provided or for co-pays, whatever it may be. Obviously, you need to have a safe and secure way to maintain this information, whether it's, you're keeping it on your own or you've got a program or system that could manage it for you. But the point is that before you can charge somebody for one of these fees, you need to have their authorization to do so. So you need to have language that gives you that permission, that they've read, they've signed. Again, a separate page from the no-show and cancellation policy that just simply says, payment authorization, and it's got some language in there that gives you the authority to charge them when needed. And that is something that I find a lot of clients of mine and licensed providers overlook. And then they come to me and they say, I provided, $3,000 worth of services, and the patient said that their credit card wasn't working and it wasn't charging, and then they left, and now I've got no way of following up, but they got their service. Or others where it's simply, oh, they owe me a $50, late fee or cancellation fee. How do I get it now, right? Do I charge it the next time they come in? Well, it's a little late at that point. It kind of defeats the purpose. And once you get, 4 months down the road when you're going to see them next, how do you go back to them now and say, hey, you owe me $50 for that late fee? You can certainly put it into your invoice to them, but the sting of it is so late, it's hard for you to push on it, and it's hard, it's unlikely that they're going to be willing to accept it, and they might push back a bit. So you want to have a method to enforce it. I say, I call it giving it some teeth, and seeing if you can make it so they respect and understand that your time is obviously valuable, and it's also valuable to your other patients. So I just got another question here. Is it possible to provide a template of a no-show cancellation policy? So answer is yes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a very basic sample, that'll come out with my notes, that y'all can see. You can steal it essentially. It won't be robust, but it'll just be very much the basics of it. And then if you want to go through drafting more to it or changing it, then we can certainly go down that route with you. Let me see here. Okay, so the other form that goes along with no-show and cancellation policy, so there's payment authorization, and this could be tied with payment authorization, but this also protects your practice for services rendered as well, whether you are insurance-based or just cash pay. It's something called a financial responsibility. Again, a paragraph, one page. It could go with the same, payment authorization. But financial responsibility, what that says, or what it should say, is essentially when the patient comes to you, they say and they sign this one page that says, essentially, I'm a patient. I understand I'm receiving services, and I understand there's charges to those services, and I agree to be financially responsible for the services rendered to me, right? Those are simple terms. And that would certainly incorporate, whether or not they're using insurance or it's cash pay. And it would say really how they're being charged as well. Up front, everything's paid, 50% at booking and 50% at start of service, et cetera, whatever you want your policy to be, but have it laid out in there. Make sure it's clear that they sign that they're going to be responsible for it, and then take it a next step to say, not only are they going to be responsible, not only do they give you authorization for it, and they've signed on to agree to give you appropriate notice for cancellation or being late or no show. Add one more thing to that, and that one more thing is about them promising to not process a chargeback on like a credit card, meaning they might get a charge from you that's perfectly appropriate, and you've got all your forms signed, but they go to their credit card and they say, this was charged without me being in person. I don't know what it is. And what happens is the credit card company pulls that money out of your account, and you have to dispute it. So how do you dispute it? Well, having forms that have been signed in person by the patient that show that they agreed to all of these charges. And then you also want to follow it up with, they had an appointment, they didn't show up, we didn't get any information, and that's why we charged it, right? So you want to make sure that they understand that they're not going to fraudulently do a chargeback and take money out of your account. Obviously, if the charge is not legitimate, they'll have the right to do that. But we want to make sure that you've got the documentation in place, the interaction in place, so you have something to submit, to defend yourself and have that chargeback canceled and put back in your favor. So we're covering a good amount here as far as patient policies and basics interactions. These are the administrative ones. These are kind of the housekeeping. What are my policies for interacting with me, as your provider and you as the patient? They can be more robust than what I discussed. Certainly think it's always good to have a good set of documents that lays out what you expect of the patient. And it can say what the patient can expect of you too. And it's important because you're building a relationship that's obviously based on healthcare. And I think you want to make sure that, you're giving the patients, all of your patients, your best time. And it's hard to do that sometimes when on the business side of things, you run into patients that, aren't being as respectful as others might be. And that creates bumps and hurdles for you. But we've seen a lot of success with our clients who, have robust forms, who know how to use them and when to use them, put them in place at the start, modify them, as appropriate when things change. And that's really what all you can do. Patients will always create a new headache for you. They'll always create another problem, and really, it's your goal to protect your practice and try to prevent it, get in front of it, and that's where a lot of these policies come in place. And also adjust and react to it, when needed, right? So if you have a baseline, that's always good. It's always easy to start with something rather than nothing. And you can use these things for troublesome patients as well, ones that constantly cause you problems, and include in their language that even says, in certain cases, you may terminate them, right? Maybe they are causing headaches for you. Maybe they're, not paying you. Maybe they're, always late or never canceling with notice, whatever it may be. They come in and they cause a scene. You want to have, equally applied, consistent policies that you can rely on, go back to, and protect your practice, protect your other patients, protect your staff. And again, without having something in writing, you never have anything to defend yourself. So if they dispute it or otherwise, make a claim to you, if you don't have something that is supposed to be a policy and they've signed it, then it doesn't exist. Didn't happen. You lose that battle. You lose that fight, and that's where you start, having business decisions to be made about, potentially all sorts of things, right? So that's going to be, our kind of pitch for this tonight is. Review your forms, make sure your forms are robust, cover your practice, think about all the scenarios. It's unfortunate, but it is a bit of the world we live in with how people interact now and how people treat their providers and doctors. And so, you got to protect yourself by having, something in writing to them, letting them know, excuse me, how to act, how to operate, and protect your business. So with that, as I said, it would be a short hit tonight, but we'll have some good content to follow up with it as well over the next few days. Yes, FOSOMA has some templates for HIPAA, some biohazard processes. I'll work with Ellen and the folks at FOSOMA to see what y'all have there as far as resources, and then can certainly work with them as well to get some other template kind of policies for you to have as a base and as a start. And then of course, any other, follow-up questions you have or otherwise, certainly make sure to reach out, ask, the folks at FOSOMA. I'm going to put my email address in the chat here. Give me 1 second, and then it'll be shared with the recording as well. So it's chase@floridahealthcarelawfirm.com. We are the Florida Healthcare Law Firm. I'm going to put our web address as well, floridahealthcarelawfirm.com. We actually have a dedicated page for FOSOMA members. Anytime we have something that's, relevant or otherwise, we share it with FOSOMA. We also share it there. And it's also on our newsletter. So if you want to be a part of our newsletter, you get updates, learn when we've got new resources out or other webinars that we're doing. You can, you can go there, check it out. Like I said, a lot of free resources, content on our website as well. But if you want to connect, feel free to email me, chase@floridahealthcarelawfirm.com. you can reach out. We'll schedule that free 15-minute consult. That consult is a way for us to hear about whatever matter or issue you might have, and also determine if we can help you. If we can give you a little bit of guidance on that call, we will, and then we'll get moving into retaining and working with you. Yes, thank you, Ellen, for putting that page directly in. It's in the chat now. We also offer a discount on fees. I believe it's 15%. It might be 20% on all of our fees across the board for any FSOMA member, whether you attended live or recorded. As long as you're a member, you'll have access to that discounted fee schedule for all of our services at the firm. So really great benefit. It's been a really great relationship, and we're just here to be resources to everybody. But certainly appreciate it and appreciate y'all having me tonight. Again, I'll be here for a couple minutes if anybody has questions. Otherwise, you've got my email, you have our website, and we'll get some more content out to you in the next couple of days here.
Thank you, Chase, so much. That was a great presentation. Anybody have any last burning questions? Does anybody want to raise their hand and talk? I can unmute you for a second if you want to ask a verbal question. There's a little raised hand under the more, maybe. Or just put in the chat if you want to be unmuted. I'll be happy to unmute you. I don't see anybody coming in. Oh, there's a hand. Here, I'm going to allow Nicole to talk. Nicole, there you are. You should be unmuted. Nicole, I don't hear you.
Case, my question for you is, which of the health professions has the best patient no-show and cancellation policy where they're able to get funds for the no-shows?
Okay, you can hear me. I don't know. I don't have that. I don't have data on that. I would say, I work with a lot of clients that are in the aesthetic space as well, like med spas. Theirs are typically the most robust because they have the most issues with their patients in that sense. But they're usually the ones that have cards on file because they sell memberships and they've got recurring packages and things like that. So they're creative. They're also purely cash pay. So it's, there's some considerations when you're dealing with insurance versus cash pay, but probably the non-insurance aesthetic clinics that I work with have the most robust forms and probably best success because they usually have a credit card on file. Now, they also have the most issues with chargebacks for all their services, not just these fees. They're just dealing with a different type of clientele, I think, than most healthcare professionals.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So people would be upset about the service they got and take their money back from like a facial or something?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Or, I've had clients who, they'll sell, Botox for foreheads. They'll sell a laser treatment. They might do a facial with it, right? It could be a couple $1,000s worth of services that someone says, oh, I want it all. And they'll get it all. And then the client, stupidly, I hate to say it, but they collect payment after the service. They don't collect it when the patient walks in, so they've now wasted and done all this work. And the patient either, doesn't pay right there because whatever reason. And then they, try to charge them for it. And maybe it does go through. But then a few days later, they get a notice from their credit card company that there was a chargeback. And basically the patient says, I never got that. I wasn't there, because what happens is, they will, maybe swipe the card and then not sign anything or not have any payment authorization or anything like that, right? So yeah, it's really a kind of messy what patients do in that space. Yeah, and then I've had patients that are unhappy too and just use that as a way to kind of make it right, or so they say.
Yeah.
So sad, but you got to protect yourself, and it's unfortunate to have to put certain things in place. But if you want to defend yourself, certainly, have documentation of it. Nicole, I see you had a question here. Would it be better to charge them ahead of time? So I think a really good practice, and sorry I didn't say this earlier, I think a really good practice would be to give them you have to give them basically a fee proposal, right? They need to know what it is they're going to get and what it's going to cost. Obviously, if there's some variability there, let them know that. And then I would collect before. I mean, it could be right before you take them into the room to perform whatever the service or treatment is. Maybe even a percentage up front to book it if they're going to come back, a week later, right? If you've got to order supplies, or it's going to take up, one or two, patient slots. You want to reserve the lunchtime break, right? If that's your most popular time, might be worthwhile to, take a deposit up front to make them really, committed to it, and then just apply that deposit.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, you don't want to get dined and dashed.
All right. Well, Chase, thank you so much. This has been great, and we'll have the recording up tomorrow and notes up hopefully tomorrow, maybe the next day. And
yep.
Thank you all for coming and asking great questions. And
definitely.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you again, as always. Certainly enjoy it. So if anybody has any follow-up, you've got my info, and we'll go from there. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you. Good night, Chase. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.